Jay's story was produced in 2010. Let's go back to 2009 when I had pneumonia. My mother was in the Alzheimer's unit at a nursing home. I had been a very strong advocate. I was there as much as I could. When I came down with pneumonia, I realized I cannot continue to do that. I cannot take a chance of coming down with pneumonia for a second time. So I wrote a goodbye letter for her. I wrote a goodbye letter, and I asked Father Teddy to be there when I read it. He came, and he said, "I will just sit here like an angel." And with an angel in the room, I said goodbye to my mother. She passed away in November of 2010. And after she died, I collapsed. I was mentally, emotionally, and physically burned out. And I needed time from work once more. When I went back to St. John's, Father Teddy had left. My music had been removed from the pews. A new transition was beginning there, a transition, leadership transition. And I felt it was time for me to move on. I gave my notice and I left. Giving up my job at St. John's, I was giving up on my livelihood. I had nothing in place to take its place. I had to start from scratch. Oh my God. I had to start from scratch creating new sources of living. As I look back, I realize how strong I was making that decision compared to years earlier, in which I had stayed many times in job environments that were not good for me. Environments in which I was not appreciated or supported. Many times I was harassed, undermined, and I would stay there because of fear and because of money. The fear of not having enough money to pay my rent. When I left St. John's, there was no fear and no concern about money. How did that happen? How did I become so strong? To take that risk, to take that leap of faith. It is not that I became stronger, it's that my faith became stronger. My trust in this other dimension that I feel have protected me and guided me through a lifetime. Without that guidance and protection, I would not be alive today. How did that faith strengthen? A lot of it was clearly my conversations with God through this creative work, through my writing. A big piece, though, was also understanding, a lot of understanding about this. When I was at the UCC church, where the clergy sexual abuse happened, I should have left much sooner. Much, much sooner. And because in spite of all the good things that were happening, there was this secret going on in which I was getting harassed and humiliated and threatened and all those things that are not good to keep in secret and to keep because I'm in fear and because I'm afraid of not having a job. That should never have happened. I should have left. Now, after I left, I should have left sooner. After I left, I met for a while with a very good pastor that was also a psychologist. And I said, why couldn't I leave? Why could not I leave sooner? And he said, the pull of home was too strong. That's why you could not leave. The pull of home. That church had become my home. And now I understand that I was only an employee and I'm not supposed to have that kind of connection. I didn't know any about that. When I was there, it became my home. I thought I would stay there for the rest of my life. Now, when I came to the States in 1979, for many years I had a recurrent nightmare. It was the same theme, different nightmares, but the theme was not knowing where is home, not knowing how to get home, not finding my way, being completely lost, or being in Argentina and all of a sudden I remember that I have a job in the States, or being in the States and realizing I have a life in Argentina. I know that part of these nightmares were related to the fact that I never found closure about having left Argentina. Coming here alone, not knowing the language, it was too much for me. I wasn't ready for that. I just had to come. So that lack of resolution from leaving Argentina is part of the situation. But there was one piece that needed to get in place there, besides the money and the history of abandonment and not having a stable home, etc. There was one more piece. In the memoir about clergy sexual abuse, Million Crosses, I write, I am homeless, describing how I felt when I left. And God said, and this is the piece that was missing in this whole picture, God said, home is in me, baby. Home is in me. By the time I left St. John's, that had gelled. That had become a reality. That home is in God, and God is in me. So home is in me because God is in me. And no matter where I go, there is home, because I carry it in me like a little snail with God. And I am absolutely convinced that this is true for any human being. That the God energy, the divine energy of creation is inside every single human being. Connecting to it, choosing to connect to it, asking for help to connect to it, all that will be different for each person. But everyone has the choice to move into that direction, which is the same thing as moving into the direction of a new earth. So my strength comes from my faith. So many times I have felt so small, so fragile, so broken down, unable to keep going. And yet I keep going. I just keep going. I don't seem to break, no matter what happens. In Million Crosses I write, my limp and battered soul carried in the arms of the Creator. So many times I was just a limp and battered soul. And I just kept going. I would rest a lot, but I kept being carried. Angels kept happening. Synchronicities kept happening. Miraculous things kept happening, and that sustained me, and eventually I would bounce back and use my own 2 feet. So that happened in 2011, leaving St. John's. On that year, 2011, I printed part 4 of the flashback series. So it's time to read a little bit from this series. This is flashback part 2, Argentina. This is life as a young woman in Argentina. My childhood and teenage years had been challenging, to say the least, and by age 18 I had no identity. I didn't know what I thought, I didn't know what I felt, and my self-esteem was so low I didn't dare sign up for a music class. How did I go from that level of fear to becoming a professional concert organist? Is one of those miracles. How did I overcome that fear? I don't know. It just happened. At age 18, I had no goals, no purpose in life, no friends, no social life, no phone, no radio, no TV, no regular meals, no income. I will read this again. At age 18, I had no goals, no purpose in life, no friends, no social life, no phone, no radio, no TV, no regular meals, and no income. At age 18, I was living with my mother, working at home for free as her assistant in her research on math education, typing, drawing, making teaching aids, making boxes for the teaching aids, editing, proofreading. So I worked for my mother for many years. And later I realized that was training me. That experience of proving and editing and cutting and pasting and drawing was preparing me to write my own books decades later. Okay? These are connections that I keep making about things that happened in my life that seem to be isolated or random events or sequences of events that connect. Flashback. I'm 7 years old. My mother makes a living translating books from English to Spanish, and I help her. At age 7, I was already proofreading my mother's work. At age 7, I didn't know how to play, but I knew how to work. I will read from Flashback Part 4, Trapped. And by the way, this whole series has a subtitle, The Story of an Indomitable Spirit, whose mind, shattered by trauma, refuses to give up. I'll read this again. The story of an indomitable spirit, whose mind, shattered by trauma, refuses to give up. I hope this reaches many, many people who have been traumatized, and that no matter the depth of that suffering and that trauma, I want you to know that it is still possible to come out of it and have a good life. You can do this. It can be done, okay? I'm going to read from this book. Who am I? What am I? Where am I? To those whose essence has been buried alive, may our true self find its way back to life. So this whole book is a search for my identity, because I didn't have one. On the phone with Sandra, who was my therapist before Stuart, she says, "You have been tortured, Jay. Your mind has been tortured." My mind has been tortured. I have suffered psychological torture. If you could see my insides, I am all black and blue. Eternity 2010, Conversations with God. God calls me Jay, okay? Jay? Yes? God says, "Do you still feel all black and blue inside? Are you kidding me? It's all gone. It's all gone." Several pages later, I had no voice. I had no choice. I was dragged into danger. My life was put in danger, and I didn't have a say about it. And in the midst of it all, immobilized by terror, I had only one obsession: not to be abandoned again. And the only way to achieve this goal, I believed, was to be a good girl. All my energy, all my being, were focused on being a good girl. Submission, submission, submission. So part of this very steady and deep inner work I have done has been dismantling good girl, who was a cage. I couldn't move there. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't be me. I was suffocated in there. But now I know that that force that was good girl was keeping me quiet in order to survive. And it reached a point where there was no need for good girl, and I had to break free. And good girl, it happens in the books, turns into fiery Jay. Okay, same energy. That ferocious energy that protected me, keeping me quiet, turned into life energy. Flashback. I'm little. My parents are not around. Living at Sylvia's, I fall asleep everywhere. When I'm awake, I can't bear the anguish, the guilt for existing, for taking space. I walk around carrying a little stool so that people see me being helpful. My young mind has decided that only if I am helpful will I have the right to exist. And God said, that was a false belief, baby. You think so? I know so. Eternity 2008. God, yes? Are you there? I'm here, Jay. I'm always here. Thank you, God, for being always there. You're most welcome, little one. Later. Now, this is my inner child kicking in, okay? This is that riot of a little girl. God? Yes? I've been thinking. Uh-oh, here comes trouble. Don't you ever get bored of being always there? I beg your pardon? Do you ever feel like being somewhere else? A change of scenery, you know what I mean? And God says, hey, little buddy, you've got me thinking here. Like, wouldn't you want to take a vacation, God? I wouldn't mind taking a break, to tell you the truth. The problem is, who would cover for me? I'll cover for you. Just like that? Sure, why not? It wouldn't be the first time that I carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. And God said, it is not your responsibility to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, Jay. And who told you that? You take on too much, little one. You think so? You take on responsibility that is not for you to take, Jay. You really think so, huh? We need to shrink you, Jay. We need to shrink me? You go shrink yourself, mister. We need to shrink your expectations of yourself to a reasonable size, Jay. I'm kind of overstretched, huh? I'm afraid so, little one. You have no boundaries. Well, neither do you. Well, that's true. Okay, then, let's go to the shrink. Shrinks are good, God says. Some better than others. Meaning? Watch out for irresponsible shrinks. God, to the reader, says, do what she says. And thank God for good shrinks. God says, good shrinks can change your life. And so can bad shrinks. You're getting me all confused here, says God. That's quite all right. You'll fit right in. Confusion is a big part of this game of healing, clearing that confusion. Writing my 4th book, diving into these memories, reading my letters to my sister, searching, passionately, furiously searching for something. I don't know what I'm searching for. And God said, you are searching for yourself, baby. I am searching for myself, searching to find and to rescue the pieces of me that got lost on the way, the pieces of me that are trapped, that are buried, that are silent, that are moaning. God said, you are weaving your pieces together, Jay. It is called integration. (2008) with Sandra. I had stopped therapy with her. She had moved to another country, but then we met because I wanted her to give me her feedback about this manuscript, about Flashback Part 4. And she said, looking back at the years when we worked together, you were struggling, Georgelina. You couldn't think. You couldn't function, she said. You would stumble in staggering. You were in the deepest, deepest fog. You'd be almost in a coma. You had years of that. I lived years of my life almost in a coma. And again, to those who are in this trial of overcoming trauma, have hope. Okay? Sandra said, the importance of the fog, it protected you from the truth, from the rage until you were ready. It had mostly to do with your mother. You needed to be ready to face the reality of her illness. That terror was so big. So in the same way that good girl was not letting me be alive because it was protecting me. Good girl, the force of good girl was fighting for my survival. And there was a time to transform that. In the same way, the fog, that is so immobilizing, has a purpose as well. To protect, it had for me, okay? It had the function of protecting me from the depth of the terror that I had in me, that I could only start to face little by little when I was ready for it. And the time came when I became strong enough to start facing all these things. There is a process, and that process dictates itself from within. So trust the process and hang in there, okay? Hang in there. Okay. In 2011, I printed that book. The next year, 2012, I'm here at BevCom, and I have a brief conversation with a producer. And she says, "You have a lot to say. You should have a show." That's all I needed. The 5-part video series, Miracles, a Spiritual Journey from Despair to Hope. A spiritual journey from despair to hope was produced here.